Okay guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. So I've learned a thing or two. Look at the fan spinning around above my head. It's going to stop in a second, I promise. I've learned a thing or two about the length of videos. So I couldn't understand why parts 2 and parts 3 of chapter 5 posted right away to the page, no problem, no issues, but part 1 would not post. And that's because part 1 was 34 minutes and some odd seconds long, and that makes it over 2 gigabytes. So that makes it that it won't post. I guess like you can make a video for YouTube and make it 4 hours long, and it will always post, or I guess whatever. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but I know that you can certainly watch like a 2-hour movie or something on YouTube, and it's fine. But this is Facebook Pages, and Pages Manager does not allow you to post anything that's over 2 gigabytes. So that being said, I'm going to watch that little counter in the corner, and I think the max really is like, I don't know, maybe 12 minutes or something, and then just cut and, you know, start again. So yeah. Anyway, here we are. We're back. Where did I leave you? Where did I leave you? Oh. Okay, so I think I left you at the point where the person at the volunteer at the hospital finally came out and told me that I could go in and see him, and I nearly bowled her over trying to get past her to get in there. And of course, he was back in trauma bay, which ICU, you know. The ICU that's in the emergency department, right? Not upstairs. So when I went in there, I mean, you know, I work in the medical field, so I've seen all kinds of stuff. But I got to tell you, people, when it's one of your own, it's a whole different ball of wax. I mean, I've seen my dad go through, you know, quad bypass surgery and various, you know, other procedures that were, you know, pretty, quite serious stuff. And my father's 84 years old. I mean, that being said, he had his quad bypass at 65, but it's a whole different thing when it's, I mean, my daughter went in at 18 to have her tonsils out, and I cried from the minute they took her away from me till the minute I got her back and saw that she was quite alive and quite fine. Yeah, it's a whole different thing when it's one of your own, and when it's the one person who, you know, is now your whole entire world. I mean, not that I don't love my children. Of course I love my children, but my children are grown and gone, and his kids are grown and gone. So, you know, we have each other. We have each other. Thank God. But we have each other. And, you know, and because of that, it's you know, you become each other's, you know, whole world. So, when I walked in there, of course, he was hooked up to every bell and whistle you can think of. All the monitors, and thank goodness for me, those monitors aren't maybe quite as intimidating as they are for a lot of people, because I do know most of what's on there, what it means. So I knew what his blood pressure was, and I knew what his heart rate was, and I knew what, you know. He was barely conscious. He didn't respond to, you know, verbal, I don't want to say command, to like a verbal, you know, stimuli, to call his name or to say anything to him in those first few hours, and he didn't respond. But if you touched him on the right side, like his right arm, right hand, sorry, other side, he would try to open his eyes and try to look at you. And, he was aphasic for about the first, it improved quite rapidly, actually. It did within the next, you know, by the time, you know, 3 days had gone by and they finally had moved him upstairs, he was actually able to speak quite well. But initially he was aphasic, and he was trying to speak, and, you know, just garbled, you know, bits and pieces of stuff was coming out, but nothing that really made any sense. His left side was completely gone. And I remember on a number of occasions over the course of that 3 days that his left arm would, you know, slide down off of the bed. And of course I was taking pillows and propping him, and you know, after my turn around, somehow it had managed to, you know, go down again. And of course, he had no control over that. He wasn't even aware that that was happening. Left leg was gone as well. He, of course, was, well, he was too ill at that time to be gotten out of bed by any means, but he would have, been completely unable to weight bear on the left. So, and of course, as I had said before, he lost the vision in his right eye. So I get to the hospital, and when I said his name and I touched him on the arm, he opened his eyes, sort of opened his eyes and looked at me, and I knew that he knew me. Yeah. I knew that he knew me. I knew he could only see me out one eye. But as soon as he saw me, that, his eyes started to fill up with tears, and I knew that he knew me. And I thought, oh, thank God for that. Thank God for that. And I will say, I don't think, I'm sure actually that there was never a point in time throughout the whole of this that he didn't know who I was. He always knew, I think, who everybody was. And his brother Rod came to visit. He knew who he was. He always knew who people were. So, I spoke to several different doctors, and I mean, especially in that first day, it's just such a, I think I'm as mixed up about that first day as he is in my head. But spoke to one doctor, and who didn't end up being the one in charge of his care. The one in charge of his care was a bit of an asshole, but we won't even go there. And I said to him, okay, so clearly my husband has had a stroke. Clearly he's, presenting as stroke, but why do we have loss of vision in the right eye, but loss of use on the left side? So basically, and he's aphasic. So clearly, what's gone on here? Are you trying to tell me that my husband has had a double-sided stroke? Because the loss of use on the left would have meant that it was a right-sided stroke. The loss of vision in the right eye would have meant that it was a left-sided stroke. So did he have stroke on both sides of his brain, basically simultaneously? That's not really possible. How does anyone live through that? And he said, well, he's got us pretty confounded too. He said, we're just taking him shortly here. They have a CAT scan is not far down the hallway, and they said we're going to take him down for CAT scan. Clearly it's a CVA, it's a stroke, but we're not really sure what's going on, because he's got all this, all over kind of, wacky, crazy stuff going on. We're not really sure what the deal is. So, the next day, I spoke to, and Font says he just has a little glimpse of this. I spoke to, a doctor. It was an older Scottish fella. He was such a sweetheart. And that was the only time we saw him. And, he said to me, he said, so you understand the difference between ischemic and hemorrhagic stroke? And I said, yeah, I do. And we talked about the fact that it was an ischemic stroke. So it was caused by blockage. And unfortunately, there's some family history there, and I'm not really going to get too much into that. But yeah, and there's family history of it in my family as well. Just the plaques and the fats building up in your bloodstream. And in my family, it causes heart attacks because it tends to collect around the heart. And in Fonz's family, it causes strokes because it tends to collect around the brain. So he said it was an ischemic stroke. And I remember asking him about TPA, and I'm trying to, oh gosh, tissue plasminogen activator. I'm going to have to look that up. I can't remember exactly what those exact words are that TPA means, but TPA is that miracle drug. And I've seen it for myself many times, while working, where somebody who's, well into their 80s at the nursing home has a pretty significant stroke right in front of you. And as the ambulance leaves with her, we're all saying to each other, she's not going to be coming back. Like she's maybe not going to pass away from this, but she's going to be, so ill and ill-affected from it that she's not going to be coming back home here to us. She's probably going to live out the rest of her days at the hospital. And like 2.5 weeks later, here she comes back. And she's fine. like literally nothing had happened to the woman, and she was in her 80s. That was the first time that I ever really saw TPA in action, and I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. So we did talk about that, and I don't know, it's a lot of it's really, really fuzzy. I know that where am I going with this? Oh God. Oh, we talked about TPA. Now the thing of it is that today, there's no way that he survived everything that he went through and is the way that he is. I mean, if you to look at him, you'd say nothing's wrong with him. There's a lot more going on than what looks like on the outside. But to look at him, I mean, to hear that he had 3 basically simultaneous strokes in under 10 minutes. In 3 different areas of his brain, you would expect the man to be, you know, unable to walk, unable to speak. He's in a wheelchair. You know, you would expect that he wouldn't have survived it, to be honest with you. But he's you know, he's a lot better than what one would expect. And his family doctor and I both agreed. Like I said to her, it was an ischemic stroke. He has to have been given TPA. Like, how do you account for this? How do you account for the fact that he can even stand up, you know, and speak? And she said, you know, I agree with you 110%, but I can't find it. So she has been through all of his charts from the hospital and everything that was done, all the documentation, and cannot find any evidence of it. And then we had to get some documentation together from the hospital for some forms or something we had to fill out. And I went through every frickin' page of it. And TPA is known by a bunch of different names. Like, you know, how... I don't know, what can I use as an example? Advil is ibuprofen, but it's sold under the name Advil. Do you know what I mean? So one of them is Atavase, and I'm pretty sure that I remember somebody saying something about Atavase, but I don't know, you're just in such a state that, you know, you don't even really register. But to this day, yeah, we can't find any documentation. And the only thing I can think of, like, there's no way that he couldn't have had it. I can't see how on earth he could have recovered like this. Somebody didn't document. If it did, that's the number one adage in nursing and fishing. If it's not documented, it did not happen. So fishing, take pictures, or it didn't happen. Never mind telling me about your big bass. If you didn't take pictures of it, that bass never happened. So anyhow, yeah, so that first day was really rough, and I spent a lot of it on the phone with family members of his and my family, and you know, friends. It was crazy. And so they said that he was, what did my phone just do? Because he was so unstable, his blood pressure was really, really like sky high, off the charts, sky high. I think the highest I ever saw it was 268 or something on, like, I don't even know, 115. I don't even remember, but I remember that it was just wacko off the charts. And they would give him, he was already on just one type of blood pressure medication prior to the strokes, and it was not a large dose at all, and just once a day. So they were giving him that, and then they were giving him, you know, another type along with it, and they tried frickin' everything. And it would come down to well, not an acceptable level by any means, but a little less dangerous of a level. And it would stay down for, you know, just a very brief period of time, and then it would just shoot right back up again. And they were trying everything. And at this point, this is when they were saying that they, you know, they didn't think they were going to be able to keep him there, that he was too sick, and that he was going to be, they were going to need to, you know, probably life flight him to Toronto or Peterborough. But there was a lot of talk about St. Mike's in Toronto. So, I know that at least once during that first 3 days, they had the old orange helicopter warming up on the helipad up at the out at the airport. There is no helipad at the hospital, unfortunately. So the airport is just it's just a tiny little, you know, small town airport. Is like by ambulance, literally, you know, 3 minutes away. And when you see the orange helicopter on the runway at the airport and an ambulance parked beside it, your blood goes cold, because you know exactly what that means. Somebody is very, very seriously ill or very seriously injured, and they're being life flighted out. So they wanted to transfer him, and they couldn't, because they couldn't get him to stabilize. He would not, you know, like I say, his pressure would stay down long enough, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe even as long as an hour, and then sky high back up again. So yeah, they couldn't really do anything with him, and it was absolutely terrifying. It was terrifying. And he doesn't remember any of this whatsoever, like none of it, not at all. So yeah, it was bad. It was really bad, and I really in the first 24 hours, I was pretty convinced that I was going to lose him. In the next 24 hours, I started to have a little glimmer of hope that you know, maybe he was going to turn away from the light and come back. And on the third day, I was finally like, yes, he's gonna hang in there. You do not have permission to fall off my apparatus, soldier. You'll break my fucking heart. Oh. But I'm going to pause, because we are gone over 15 minutes. And God knows it won't post it. So pause, people. Okay, I'll be right back.